Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is chapter 3 of the novel Tales with a Twist. Detours. Lonely coursed again as he came to another of those roads singing that, to him at least, seemed to say nothing intelligible, that he should turn off and follow the detoursing. Since then he had felt totally lost. Oblong orange bird with a white floor scan that are square at one end. Who knows what they mean? Still not finally installed on the GPS he was intending to have installed, and probably lost on what seemed to be a deserted and endless dusty. He glanced at his cell phone on the dashboard and noted that the signal strength was way down. I need to get somewhere anywhere quickly, Annette was while she was panting again. When we got off the get you to the hospital, I will call my parents after the bird. Michelle turned to leave. Because he could not just walk off and leave her on her own. On turning back to the little shops, Michelle was tossing up between some flour and attractive box of chocolate. He felt that he should take something. The shop was about to close. Anything suitable for a baby girl? Is this a baby show? Annette was lying in the bed, looking pale, very tired and alone in a clear bassinet. Alongside there was a small beside and placed the gift in her cabinet. Assume the UK number is your parents. She nodded. I will do it now. Annette told him about the baby, and he could hear the yell of excitement from across the room. Just a short visit. He could not imagine how that would feel, but figured that it would not be too much fun. I will get a taxi home and on Monday and then see what is happening. Michelle took a number of shots of the baby and promised to get some print to her the next day. Don't go getting a taxi. It's so far and too awkward with the baby. I have spoke to a acquaintance of mine who can arrange for you to get home with some degree of comfort and independence. Just call this number and ask for David. But don't go getting the idea that he is a spoiled little rich boy. David would easily find a good job very quickly on his own. But at the moment he found himself wanting to get to grips with all its complexity. They were very concerned about Annette and her living on the farm alone with the baby. Before making the return visit, he made a number of calls to ensure that his plan was foolproof as possible and arranged with Annette's parents that he would spend several hours with them. Michelle began by casually inquiring of Brian exactly what field he had been employed in, but there was even more to come when he inquired of Catherine what she had done once Annette had grown up. Brian and Catherine looked as if they might well be just what he was looking for. To be quite honest, Michelle began to present his suggestion. I come here to put up proposition to you. Brian and Catherine sat in disbelief. Could see that his proposal was going to receive careful consideration, but chalk his and let them discuss it in pitch. He had typed draft onto his laptop, which he displayed for them to for themselves. They agree with one or two small alternation, and Michelle printed copies for signature. The contract are effective from 2 days before you fly out to New Zealand. 3 days ago we had only heard of you through Annette. Since then we have made a set job and to travel to New Zealand. He had no other things in mind to discuss with Annette and did not want her to have built up too much resistance to what she might see as more of his interference in their affairs. David, as well as making several calls to Annette and arranging to meet her in Auckland on Friday afternoon. No mention was made the calls, but Michelle was quite sure that Annette would have something to say about his little schemes when they met face to face on Friday. Through Annette's returning smile, Michelle could clearly see that her underlying suspicion of him and his real motivation. He turned the conversation back to the baby. He talks to me a lot and is always willing to try and explain what is going on, why certain things are done of need doing. Me to assist you and David in helping you find a long-term solution to the problems. There was hurry as it would only be half an hour's drive, and her parents would still have however long it took them to get through custom and immigration. Almost as soon as the car started to move, Alexandra fell into a deep sleep, and once off the road, Michelle thought that it would be safe now enough to continue last evening conversation. They sat in silence, and Michelle began to think that his trying, especially to him, outbursts might have scared off Annette even more. He parked at the airport, choosing the shortest spot he could find, and opened the door and Annette to lift the sleeping baby in her car seat out of the car. Brian and Catherine had long since mastered the things that Michelle had intended that they be able to learn, and were in fact doing a lot more, even though they spent a considerable amount of time with Annette and the baby and traveling around the country. On afternoon just before Christmas, there was some talk about setting a date for their return to England, and Michelle suggests that late February might be suitable. She would certainly be alone again, just like after Alex had been killed, and before Michelle had come into her life. She must not give in and spoil the rest of her parents' day. Maisel seemed to be saying something concerning her. He was speaking to her parent. You have all wondered exactly why I have obviously strengthened our period of training in New Zealand with Alex Sudden of untimely death, the birth of Alexandra, and the worry over the farm needed all the support possible and certainly more that I could have offered. I was going to propose was for us to get married. Contemplate before last February was he about to be rejected. Your mother and I are both quite certain and Alex would approach. She rose and stood beside Michelle who put his free arm around her while Alexandra feeling a sense of occasion. There is no road would ever be used as a detour. It is a one-way dead end road. The only way in or out it is the way we traveled when you took me to the hospital. And then chapter 4 happened tense. It had been one of those annoying days when absolutely nothing seemed to have gone to plan. Generally, very few bothered him sufficiently to cause him to outwardly express no anger or any other negative emotion. He gardened, entertained of occasion, indulged in his hobbies, enjoyed the beach, skiing and travel, and had a small circle of friends, male and female. We often dined, attended shows or the cinema. That Monday morning had dawned fine, but Ralph had not seen the ominous sunrise because he had omitted to set his alarm. Ralph was late arriving at work where, quite against his normal polish and better judgment, he had been persuaded to attend an early meeting, when he could be charging far more by the hour for such people to waste his time. He desperately needed advice and a matter that his superior wished to discuss the very next morning. Annette's life was in many respects the complete antithesis of Ralph. It was her custom to rise early to ensure that first use of the house single bedroom without fuss. Annette was normally forced to arrive at the bus stop in the morning and tended when possible to occupy the same seat each day. It was normal for her to arrive at work about half an hour before the scheduled starting time ended, because she tried to avoid work overtime in the evenings. Jonathan was well known to the boys in blue as well as many in the justice, judiciary and prison service. He had quietly in the force managed to acquire 3 new cars and delivered them new owners. Jonathan chose not to dress to impress. Jonathan had another brainwave. He developed this idea. About halfway along there was a Mathers factory, and almost directly opposite was a warehouse that stored large quantities of paint of related products, starting with the Mathers adventures, he carefully broke into the back of the deserted building and set a small fire in an area from which it would slowly spread. Things were starting to move along very nicely. Jonathan was fascinated at the mayhem he had caused with just a piece of metal pole and a stone, and reflected on the aged bonus of the Fieldstorm. None of them were aware of other relief dramas that were being played out across the city, and on one that was beginning in a small restaurant. There was not a great rush to the bus as it pulled up, so Annette and Ralph moved to the step where he urged her forward into the bus as he followed with the umbrella. The driver explained half the normal route was closed because of the fire, no traffic light, and terrible traffic jams. They rang the bell on alighted, where the driver was able to pull over for a moment. They made a dash for the restaurant where the owner, who had been wondering if he was going to get any customer on such a night. During the meal, they learned of each other's favorite pastimes and found that they had many interests in common. By the time they were dropping Annette off at her home, they had arranged to go to a movie. Later, they both drove off into a relaxed and peaceful sleep, planning and dreaming of things that they were both sure would eventuate in the days, weeks, and years that were to follow the upcoming busy weekend. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.